Hey guys, and welcome back to another video of mine. In today's video, we're going to be looking at how to play UCL Fantasy for the upcoming season. I'll walk you through scoring points, substitutions, captaincy, the chips, and I'll also give you my 3 top tips for the season ahead. So let's jump into it. So match days, what are match days? Well, a match day is similar to a game week or a round. Now, there are 17 match days in a UCL fantasy campaign. There are 8 match days in the league phase. There are 2 match days in the knockouts, 2 in the round of 16, 2 in the quarterfinals, 2 in the semi-finals, and 1 in the final. Match days can be split across days or weeks. For example, in match day one is split across Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday across 3 days. Whereas after the league phase, some match days can be split across 2 weeks. So that is a match day. So another vital part of a UCL fantasy campaign is obviously team selection. Now, firstly, one of the quickest things you could do is pick a team name. Sometimes that does take some time depending on how far you want to go with your team name. Now, you could put in anything for now, or you can head over to fantasyfootballcommunity.com where there's lots of great, funny fantasy team names that you could name your team. Now, moving on to the actual team selection, you have €100 million budget to pick 15 players. Those players are 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, and 2 forwards. Now, you do get an original budget of 100 million, but that does increase after the league phase to 105 million. And that is to facilitate, obviously, the price changes, price rises, and of course, usually the best teams and the most expensive assets do usually or tend to progress to the latter stages of the competition. So that extra budget is to facilitate those changes. Now, there are limitations to how many players you can own from each team. So say Barcelona example, you can only own 3 Barcelona players or any other team's players, 3 of any other team's players in the league phase, but that number does increase obviously to 4 during the knockouts, the round of 16, 5 in the quarterfinals, 6 in the semi-finals, and then finally 8 in the finals. So substitutions, a super important part of UCL fantasy. It's absolutely critical that you get this right. You can make up to 4 manual substitutions during a match day in UCL Fantasy. So, for example, if a player doesn't do that well, he picks up 2 points on the Tuesday, you can then replace that player with a player off your bench who is yet to play on the Wednesday or the Thursday, depending on how many days are in that match day. With that in mind, it is important how you set your team out each week, right? So the players starting earlier in the week kind of have to go in your starting 11, whereas the players playing later on in the week, ideally you want to put them on your bench. If your players in your starting 11 don't perform that well, you can then bring the players off your bench and replace them. That means it's also important that we wait for lineups because you don't really want to be putting on subs if they're not starting. You want to see the lineups, you want to see that the players off your bench are starting, and then you want to replace them. It's also really important to know that if your player does receive a red card, you cannot sub them off. They are stuck in your starting lineup. Now, captaincy, it's absolutely critical that you understand how captaincy works before going into the start of the season. Like any other fantasy game, you captain a player and you earn double points. Now, that is the case in UCL Fantasy, but in this game, you can actually change your captain if you're not happy with how he's done. So you can change your captain as many times as there are days in a match day. So, for example, there are 3 days in match day 1, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So if you're not happy with your captaincy return on the Tuesday, you can change to a player who is yet to play on the Wednesday. And that is similar to Thursday. It's one of the reasons why I really, really like this game. The fact you can change captain every day of a match day, I just think is brilliant. What is important to note, though, is that once you've changed captain, you can't then get that captaincy return from a player that's already played. So, for example, if a player you captained scored on the Tuesday and you change to a player who blanks on the Wednesday, you can't then move the captaincy armband back over to that player who scored. So, transfers. Like any other fantasy game, you can make transfers to try and improve your squad in between rounds. So there's lots of implications we need to consider here. Firstly, it's important to note that you are given an allocation of free transfers, and how many you get kind of depends on the round, which we'll go through shortly. What is important to mention, though, is that for each additional transfer that we spend outside of our free allocation, it's -4 points. So it's in other words, it's a -4 hit. If you make a transfer outside of your, say, 2 free transfers, you will receive a -4 points deduction. Now, in terms of the allocation of transfers, it kind of, as mentioned, it's kind of dependent on what round it is. So there are 3 occasions where you are given unlimited transfers. That is before match day 1, before the knockout round, and before the round of 16. In the other rounds, you are given an allocation of free transfers. So from match days 1 to 8, you are given 2 free transfers between every round to try and help with your squad. Then it's a case of being given 5 free transfers, say, before the semi-finals, before the finals, and then it's only 3 free transfers between the second legs. You can roll your transfers. You can save transfers in this game, but you can only save 1 transfer between the league phase match days. And then after the league phase has finished, you can't roll your transfers or save any transfers at all. That means if you don't use your transfers after the league phase, you will lose them. Deadlines are super important in fantasy games, and you'll find them in pretty much most fantasy games. Making sure you don't miss them is absolutely critical. If you do miss them, there's a huge risk that you could get left behind in this game. Now, in UCL Fantasy, there are 2 types of deadlines. There are big ones and there are small ones. Now, the big deadlines come before the match days. So before each match day, you set your team, you set your chips, your captain. Now, that is, for me, the big deadlines. The smaller deadlines are in between the matches, say before a Wednesday, before the first kickoffs on a Wednesday, or before the first kickoffs on a Thursday. That is where you can kind of swap your subs around, change captaincy and stuff like that. So again, big deadlines and small deadlines. So making sure that we meet them is super, super important. Also, waiting for lineups. I think waiting for lineups is massively underrated. So you usually get the lineups before every deadline, big or small, which is super helpful, especially when it comes to making subs or changing captaincy. So again, making sure you wait for lineups before big and small deadlines is also really important. So I've kept this next section as straightforward and simple as possible. Sometimes when you're explaining chips, it can get quite confusing if you chuck a load of words and pictures on screen. So UCL, like many other games, has given us chips to try and improve our squads in any given week. Now, there are times that you can't use these chips. So let's just get it out there. You can't use these chips ahead of match day 1, ahead of the knockouts, and ahead of the round of 16. So what do the chips do? They've got different functions. A wildcard, if you activate it, you can make as many changes to your squad as you can up until the deadline. They are permanent changes and they are within a budget. With Limitless, there is no budget restrictions at all. You can fit in the most expensive players that you possibly can into your team, but the team is only for 1 week. Once that match day is over, your original team will return. So super straightforward. The wildcard is unlimited permanent changes within a budget, and the Limitless is unlimited changes without a budget, but only for 1 week. It only lasts 1 week. So that's super straightforward with the chips. So similar to other fantasy games, there is a point system, a way in which players earn points. And UCL Fantasy is quite similar to FPL, Fantasy Premier League, in terms of assist. You get 3 points. In terms of how many points you get for a goal, depending on position, whether that be 4, 5 or 6. But it also has added its own kind of touch to the scoring system. One of them, obviously, you can see on the screen is the fact that a player can get Player of the Match award, the Player of the Match award, and which provides them with an additional 3 points. Now, this doesn't release until after the game. It is kind of confirmed by a technical observer. There's never kind of too much to it. You know, they don't really take into account loads and loads of stats. There's a lot of debate around it, but it is quite fun. You're never quite sure who is going to get it, which makes things, you know, fun. It can be frustrating sometimes, but I do think it's a nice addition to a fantasy point scoring system. That is also similar to goals scored outside the box. Now, it is only 1 point, but they are harder to score, right? Goals outside the box can be most of the time harder to score. So the fact that UCL Fantasy has kind of added points to that, it really does add a nice touch. Overall, I really, really like the scoring system on UCL Fantasy. Another one is a plus 1 point for every 3 ball recoveries. That's for every single position as well. It kind of makes centre backs and, you know, defensive midfielders a lot more appealing than they normally would. Now, you know, it is a nice addition. There's a lot of nice additions to the UCL Fantasy scoring system, and I really do like it. But you can check out the full list of scoring on how to score points over on the UEFA Gaming website. But I just thought I'd highlight some of the most important ones. So moving on to my top tips ahead of the start of the season, you know the basics of the rules, you know how to use your chips, you know how subs work, you know how captaincy works. Now, my 3 top tips will really, really help you and guide you into the season ahead. One of my first top tips is something that even the most experienced managers don't do, and that is set alarms. Now, you guys should be setting alarms for every big deadline. Remember, we talked about big and small deadlines. You should be setting alarms for big and small deadlines. So you should be setting alarms for just before each match day. And you should also be setting alarms on the Wednesday before the games kick off, and maybe even the Thursday, if there is a Thursday, before the games kick off. This means, obviously, you'll never miss a deadline. You'll be able to make your transfers, swap captains, swap subs, set out chips. You'll be able to do all of that and not have to worry about a thing. Just simply set an alarm on your phone. I know it's annoying. I know, we don't like actively setting alarms, but this is so important for me. It's become, a weekly thing in every fantasy game, and I would definitely advise to do it. Now, another of my tips is I have stated good bench, but that is because a lot of people who play FPL or Fantasy Premier League don't need a bench. They tend to kind of put as little money on the bench as possible, and that's not how UCL Fantasy works. So I've put a good bench down, but you need to spread the cash, spread your budget, make sure you've got 15 good options in your squad because you will need them for substitutions. My third and final tip is captain for every day. Before you make your transfers, before you use your unlimited transfers or anything like that before a match day, make sure that you have a good captain, a good captaincy option for every day of that match day. So, for example, match day 1 has a Tuesday, Wednesday, and a Thursday. Make sure you have a good player in your team that you can captain on all 3 of those days. So, they're my top tips. Set alarms, spread the cash, and also have a captain for every day in the match day ahead. If you guys are looking for team reveal videos and deadline streams this season for UCL Fantasy, then you're in the right place. Please make sure you like and subscribe for the season ahead, and I'll see you guys again soon.